Don't just listen to my voice. Feel the weight of every word I'm about to speak, because in the next few minutes, I'm going to reveal a truth that has the power to completely rewire the way you see yourself and the world around you. A truth so simple, so subtle, and yet so transformative that once you grasp it, you'll begin to understand why so many people live beneath the level of their true potential. It happened one quiet morning. I was standing in my office staring at my reflection through the glass window when something profound hit me. I realized that every single day we speak around 16,000 words. 16,000. But then came the question that stopped me in my tracks. How many of those words are directed toward ourselves? And even more importantly, what kind of words are they? You see, your mind, the most sophisticated divine technology ever created, is always listening. It doesn't sleep. It doesn't stop. Every thought, every phrase, every whisper of self-talk that passes through your lips or your imagination, it's processing it right now as you sit here. But there's something even more remarkable. Your mind doesn't just hear what you say, it believes it. It takes your words as commands, as truth, as the law by which it must operate. There's a law in this universe as certain as gravity. The words you speak to yourself are creating your reality. They're not empty echoes, they are seeds. Seeds that grow silently beneath the surface of your consciousness, shaping your tomorrow long before you can see it. Most people go through life unaware that the voice inside their head is either building their future or slowly dismantling it. I've stood before thousands, spoken across continents, looked into the eyes of people from every walk of life, from CEOs to students, from dreamers to doubters, and I discovered something astonishing. The most fulfilled, successful, and impactful individuals all share a single trait. They have mastered the way they speak to themselves. They don't let their inner dialogue drift on autopilot. They design it with precision. They've turned their words into instruments of creation. And here's the beautiful truth. You can do the same. You don't need to be born with some rare gift. You don't need special access or privilege. This is not talent, it's technology, a divine technology available to every one of us. And if you give me the next few moments, I'll show you how to activate it. Imagine this. Your brain is made up of billions of neurons connected through vast highways of thought called neural pathways. These pathways weren't random. They were built by repetition, by the words you've been speaking to yourself for years, maybe decades. Some of those roads lead to strength, confidence, and peace. But others, perhaps the ones you've traveled most, lead straight to fear, self-doubt, and limitation. For years, you might have been telling yourself, I'm not ready, I'm not enough, I always fail. And your brain, loyal and obedient, built highways toward those conclusions. It's not judging your words, it's following your commands. But here's the miracle. You can rebuild those highways. You can redirect the traffic of your thoughts. You can construct new paths of power, faith, and clarity. And it doesn't take years. It begins in 3 days. 3 days to start changing the inner language that has defined your limits. You might be thinking, that sounds impossible. But let me ask you, how long does it take for a seed to begin growing once it's placed in fertile soil? The moment it's planted, something begins to shift beneath the surface. The transformation starts immediately, even before your eyes can see it. The same is true of your mind. The moment you begin to speak differently, your inner world begins to reorganize itself. New pathways start forming. Old ones begin to weaken. Possibilities you never considered start to appear. You may not feel it instantly, but the process of transformation begins the moment you decide to speak with intention. Science has confirmed what Scripture revealed long ago. As a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. Your brain cannot distinguish between what you vividly imagine and what you experience in the physical world. When you say, I'm tired, your brain releases chemicals to match that statement. When you say, this is too hard, it begins shutting down solutions. Your words don't just describe your life, they design it. Every word you speak to yourself is a seed. And your subconscious mind is the soil. That soil doesn't question you. It doesn't ask whether your words are true or false. It simply grows whatever you plant. If you sow limitation, you'll harvest more of it. But if you begin sowing faith, strength, and possibility, your life will start reflecting those truths. Let me show you something powerful. When you tell yourself, I can't do this, your mind constructs a wall to protect that belief. When you say, it's impossible, you're laying bricks of fear around your potential. But words are not made of stone. They can be broken, reshaped, and rebuilt. The same repetition that once built your barriers can now dismantle them. Think of a drop of water falling on a rock. It seems weak, harmless, insignificant. But when it falls in the same place over and over again, it eventually carves through solid stone. That's what happens when you speak powerful words consistently. They pierce through your resistance until your mind begins to shift. Your brain is not fixed, it's formable. This is called neuroplasticity, the divine ability of your brain to create new connections throughout your entire life. Every time you speak differently, every time you replace fear with faith, your brain rewires itself to match your new truth. You are literally redesigning the structure of your mind. And this is just the beginning. Because once you understand how to speak to yourself strategically, systematically, intentionally, everything changes. You're not just modifying thoughts, you're reconstructing the foundation of your destiny. So before we go deeper, pause for a moment. Let these words sink into you. Every sound you release carries energy, shaping your future. Every phrase you whisper is either strengthening or sabotaging your next chapter. And as we continue this journey together, you're going to learn not just what to say, but how to say it in a way that makes transformation inevitable. Because your words aren't just sounds, they're blueprints. And starting today, we're going to design a new structure for your life, one word at a time. The truth is, most people underestimate the quiet power of repetition. They think transformation comes from a single moment of inspiration, a spark, a speech, a sudden breakthrough. But real transformation is forged in the small moments, in the steady rhythm of what you whisper to yourself when no one else is listening. It's not what happens in the spotlight that shapes you, but what happens in the silence when it's just you and your thoughts. You see, the words you speak to yourself are not random. They are instructions, and your brain obeys them faithfully. It doesn't argue. It doesn't ask for evidence. It simply follows the code. When you keep saying, I'm overwhelmed, your brain reorganizes your entire nervous system to match that state. When you say, I always mess things up, your subconscious filters out every success and amplifies every mistake until your world confirms your belief. But the opposite is also true. If you begin to speak with faith, your brain starts searching for evidence of that truth. It begins to align your perception, your emotions, your very biology with the energy of the words you choose. That's why transformation always begins in the unseen. You don't have to see results immediately for change to be happening. Just as roots grow before branches appear, your mind begins to form new pathways long before your circumstances reflect them. Every time you speak words of power, even when you don't feel them yet, you are planting invisible roots that will one day bear visible fruit. Let me make this real for you. Imagine standing at the edge of a vast field. For years, you've been sowing the same kind of seed, words of doubt, words of fear, words of limitation. And now your field reflects that. It's filled with weeds of anxiety and thorn thoughts that choke your confidence. But today, you're holding a different kind of seed, words of life, words of power, words that align with who you were designed to be. The moment you plant them, the soil doesn't resist. It simply accepts what you give it. That's how the mind works. It is always ready to grow what you feed it. Now understand this, the process won't always feel magical. In fact, at first it will feel uncomfortable, even false. When you start saying, I am strong, something inside you might whisper, that's not true. When you declare, I am capable, an echo of the past may rise and say, but remember when you failed? This is not resistance. This is evidence that your old programming is trying to survive. It's the final protest of a belief that's losing power. Every new declaration you make sends a shock through that old system. And with each repetition, the noise fades, the resistance weakens, and a new truth begins to take root. You don't overcome the old by fighting it. You overcome it by replacing it. The mind can't hold two dominant beliefs at the same time. So when you consistently feed it new thoughts, new language, new images, the old ones begin to dissolve naturally. You're not erasing your past, you're rewriting your future. I remember working with a man who had spent most of his life telling himself that he was unlucky. Every failed opportunity, every missed promotion, every disappointment became another brick in the wall of that belief. And then one day he decided to change one sentence. Instead of saying, I'm unlucky, he began saying, everything is preparing me for something better. That one shift changed the entire trajectory of his life. Within months, doors opened that had been closed for years, not because the world suddenly favored him, but because his perception aligned with opportunity instead of rejection. His words turned his eyes toward possibility. That's the power of language. It's not just communication, it's creation. You are speaking your world into existence every single day, and the words you choose determine the frequency you live on. Say, I'm always struggling, and your brain will filter your life for evidence of struggle. Say, I'm learning, growing, evolving, and it will filter your life for evidence of progress. It's not magic, it's mechanism. The same divine law that governs faith and creation operates through the language you use. So how do we begin this inner transformation in practice? It starts with awareness. For the next few moments, I want you to become the observer of your own thoughts. Listen carefully, not to what you say out loud, but to what you whisper internally. What do you tell yourself when you make a mistake, when you look in the mirror, when you're alone with your thoughts? Those private conversations are the architecture of your reality. The goal is not to silence every negative word immediately, but to notice it. Awareness is the first act of dominion. Once you see it, you can change it. When you catch yourself saying, I can't, don't try to argue with it, redirect it. Replace it with, I'm learning how. When you hear the whisper, I'm not ready, respond gently but firmly, I am becoming ready. Every redirection builds a new bridge in your mind. Your words should no longer reflect your fears, they must reflect your faith. Because when you start speaking from the identity of who you're becoming instead of the memory of who you were, your life begins to align with that new version. The transformation is not about pretending, it's about prophesying. You're not lying to yourself when you declare strength in weakness. You're simply speaking to the future until it becomes the present. And so the work begins, not in grand gestures or dramatic resolutions, but in quiet, deliberate self-conversation, in the way you speak to your reflection, in the words you choose when you fail, in the tone you use when you speak about your future. That's where destiny begins, not in the noise of the world, but in the whisper of your own soul saying, I am becoming more. As we continue this journey, remember this, your words are not powerless. They are creative energy. They are shaping, molding, and constructing the world you will wake up to tomorrow. The question is no longer, can I change? The question is, am I willing to speak the language of the person I'm becoming? Because the answer to that question determines the direction of your life. And your transformation has already begun. There comes a point in this journey when the realization strikes that words alone are not enough. They must be embodied. They must move from sound to structure, from language to lifestyle. Speaking life over yourself is not a performance. It's a process of internal alignment. The moment you decide to take authority over your inner language, you begin a reordering of your entire inner world. You might not notice it at first. The changes are subtle, almost invisible. You wake up one morning and instead of immediately thinking about everything that could go wrong, a quiet thought surfaces. What if today works in my favor? That single thought is evidence of transformation taking root. The old patterns don't disappear overnight, but their grip weakens every time you choose a new response. Your mind, like any landscape, must be cultivated. Think of it as fertile soil. It doesn't care what seeds you plant, it will grow whatever you feed it. That's why discipline matters more than emotion. Inspiration fades, but repetition ingrains. If you only speak power when you feel powerful, you'll never become consistent. But when you speak strength, even while trembling, your words begin to carry the weight of conviction. There's a scientific and spiritual reason for this. Every time you speak a thought out loud, you reinforce the neural connection behind it. If that statement is negative, you're deepening a rut of limitation. But if it's empowering, you're strengthening the pathways of belief. Over time, your mind begins to default to what it has rehearsed most. That's why the daily practice of speaking intentionally is not optional. It's essential. You are literally programming your brain's automatic responses. And yet, this is not just about changing your vocabulary. It's about changing your identity. The words I am are sacred. They are the gateway between who you were and who you are becoming. When you say I am tired, your body listens. When you say I am focused, your mind adjusts its chemistry to match that command. When you say I am growing, your perception begins to expand, searching for signs of that truth. Every declaration is a code that either opens doors or closes them. That's why your inner dialogue must be handled with reverence. The universe doesn't respond to casual self-talk. It responds to conviction. When you speak from alignment, from belief, your words begin to carry authority. It's not the volume that gives them power, it's the certainty behind them. Quiet words rooted in faith carry more energy than loud words spoken in doubt. But let's be honest, changing your inner language is not easy. There will be moments when your circumstances seem to contradict everything you're saying. You'll declare peace and still feel chaos. You'll speak abundance and still face lack. You'll affirm strength while feeling weak. That's where most people give up, mistaking process for failure. But transformation is not proven by immediate evidence. It's proven by endurance. The seed doesn't stop growing just because you can't see it. Every time you hold your confession steady, even when life doesn't yet reflect it, you're training your mind to prioritize faith over feeling. You're teaching your subconscious that your words are law. That's the moment true power begins, not when it's easy, but when it's tested. There's a passage I often think about. Guard your heart, for out of it flow the issues of life. In today's language, that means protect your internal world, because everything external begins there. Your thoughts, emotions, and words are not random. They're the architects of your reality. If your inner atmosphere is polluted with worry, doubt, and self-criticism, no external success will ever feel sustainable. But when your inner life is filled with clarity, faith, and gratitude, you become unshakable, even when the world around you trembles. You must learn to manage your mental ecosystem with the same care you give to your outer life. We spend hours managing our appearance, our schedules, our social feeds, but how much time do we spend managing our thoughts? How much time do we dedicate to pruning the weeds of negativity and nurturing the seeds of growth? Peace is not the absence of problems. It's the product of a disciplined mind. So how do you begin cultivating this discipline? It starts with creating small, sacred pauses throughout your day. Moments to reset your language before your emotions take over. When frustration rises, breathe and whisper, I am centered. When doubt tries to creep in, affirm, I am guided. When anxiety stirs, declare, I am safe and grounded. These are not empty phrases, they are recalibrations. They pull you back to alignment with truth before chaos can take root. Over time, this becomes your default state. The storms may still come, but you'll no longer be at their mercy. You will have trained your mind to respond rather than react. You'll have developed an inner rhythm that remains steady even when the world speeds up. That's what it means to have a renewed mind. Not one free from challenges, but one that interprets challenges differently. This is the power of speaking to yourself with intention. It's not about pretending your struggles don't exist. It's about refusing to let them define your identity. You are not your mistakes. You are not your fears. You are not your current circumstances. You are the voice behind them, the consciousness that can redirect them at any moment. And every time you choose your words with awareness, you reclaim that authority. So as you continue this journey, remember, your transformation won't come in the form of one grand revelation, but in the quiet repetition of truth. Every I am capable, every I am becoming stronger, every I am enough is a brick in the foundation of your new self. Speak these words not as a wish, but as a fact already unfolding. Speak them until your mind believes them, until your habits reflect them, until your life manifests them. Because when you change the conversation within, everything outside begins to change naturally. The world doesn't shift first, you do. And when you do, the world can't help but follow. There's a moment in every transformation when silence becomes your teacher. When you begin to notice that the real battle isn't happening around you, it's happening inside you. The war between who you were and who you are becoming is fought in the language of your thoughts. And every word, every phrase, every inner whisper you allow to take root determines which side wins. Most people lose that battle, not because they lack strength or talent, but because they don't understand how powerful the unseen conversation inside them truly is. They try to change their lives through action alone, new habits, new goals, new environments, without realizing that action is only the echo of belief. If your inner dialogue doesn't change, nothing else will last. You can't build a new future with the same words that built your past. To change your life, you must first change your atmosphere, the invisible climate of your mind. It's the space you live in long before anyone sees the results. It's the air you breathe, the frequency you carry, the energy you bring into every room. The atmosphere of your life is created by your thoughts and sustained by your words. So if you want to change your outcomes, you must learn to change your internal weather. There was a man I once met, a quiet, hard-working soul who had spent years feeling invisible. Every time he spoke about himself, he used small words. I'm just trying. I'm not special. I don't think I'm meant for much. He said them lightly, as if they didn't matter, but those phrases had become the rhythm of his existence. His life was reflecting the size of his language. And then, one day, after a long conversation, I asked him a question that shifted everything. What would happen if you spoke about yourself the way God sees you? He hesitated. I don't know if I could do that, he said. You don't have to feel it yet, I told him. You just have to say it. That simple instruction became his turning point. He began to practice, quietly at first, saying, I am chosen, I am equipped, I am capable. At first, it felt unnatural, almost uncomfortable. But within weeks, something changed. His posture shifted. His decisions became bolder. The way he walked into a room changed. The world hadn't changed. He had. His language lifted his perception, and his perception lifted his life. You see, language is the bridge between your faith and your reality. The words you speak are not just reflections of what you see. They are invitations for what you desire to appear. When you say, I am not enough, you close doors before you even reach them. But when you say, I am growing into more than enough, you open a path that didn't exist before. Your words are permissions. They either authorize your expansion or limit it. But let's be honest, speaking powerfully isn't easy in a world that constantly feeds you fear. Every headline, every algorithm, every advertisement is designed to tell you what you lack. You are surrounded by voices competing for your attention, whispering, you're behind, you're not doing enough, you're missing out. If you don't learn to manage that noise, it will begin to sound like your own voice. That's why protecting your mental environment is no longer optional. It's survival. You can't expect peace if your mind is a marketplace for every opinion. You have to decide which voices get access to your attention. Every day, ask yourself, who am I allowing to speak into my life? Because what enters your ears eventually shapes your inner language. And your inner language creates your destiny. There's a discipline to silence that most people avoid. We fear quiet because it forces us to hear what we've been avoiding. But silence isn't empty. It's sacred space. It's the workshop where your next level is designed. It's where you begin to reintroduce yourself, to the person you were meant to be before doubt taught you to shrink. In that stillness, start to rebuild your inner vocabulary. Replace self-criticism with curiosity. Instead of saying, why am I like this? Ask, what am I learning from this? Instead of saying, I always fail, say, I'm still refining. Those small shifts rewire your emotional responses. They teach your brain to interpret challenges as growth rather than punishment. The words don't just change your thoughts, they change your emotional chemistry. But transformation doesn't happen through random affirmations. It happens through alignment, when your words, your thoughts, and your actions begin to tell the same story. Too many people say, I believe I'm capable, but live as if they're still afraid. The real power begins when your language becomes consistent with your behavior, when your words stop being decoration and start being direction. So here's how you begin to live in that alignment. Every morning, before the world interrupts you, take a moment to choose your language for the day. Don't wake up reacting to life. Wake up declaring it. Speak out loud even if it feels awkward. Say, today I am focused. Today I move with purpose. Today I walk in peace. The goal isn't to control every circumstance, but to take ownership of your internal response. You're setting the emotional tone before life has a chance to set it for you. Throughout the day, stay alert. The moment you feel your energy shifting, when doubt, frustration, or fear tries to hijack your thoughts, pause and reset your internal weather. Whisper to yourself, I am still in control. My peace is my responsibility. This single habit, practiced daily, becomes the backbone of inner mastery. And when the day ends, take inventory. Reflect not on how others spoke to you, but on how you spoke to yourself. Did your words build or break you? Did they lift your spirit or drain your energy? Your evening reflection isn't about guilt, it's about awareness. Awareness builds consistency, and consistency builds transformation. By now, you've probably realized that this journey is not about perfection. It's about alignment and awareness. You will still have moments of doubt, still face fear, still stumble. But each time you choose your words consciously, you take one step closer to freedom. The goal isn't to silence every negative thought, it's to drown it in the sound of truth. Because when your words finally align with your identity, when your language stops describing your pain and starts declaring your purpose, you stop living as a victim of your thoughts and start living as the architect of your destiny. And that's when the real transformation begins. Not when the world starts believing in you, but when you finally do. There's a certain morning, every person who has ever transformed remembers it. The day doesn't feel spectacular. The sky doesn't look different. The world goes on as usual, but something inside shifts. You wake up, and for the first time, your thoughts don't immediately pull you backward. There's a space, a small but unmistakable gap between who you were yesterday and who you're becoming. That's the beginning of true awareness. It's not dramatic, it's subtle. But in that subtlety lies power, because transformation rarely announces itself. It whispers. It comes through the quiet decision to think differently, to respond differently, to believe differently. Most people wait for life to give them a reason to change. But real growth begins when you give yourself permission to evolve before you have proof that it's working. The problem is that many of us live as prisoners of our own mental habits. We wake up and think the same thoughts we thought yesterday. We repeat the same emotional loops, replay the same inner conversations, and then we wonder why nothing changes. It's not because life is unfair, it's because our minds are running on autopilot. The greatest danger to your potential isn't failure, it's familiarity. Familiar thoughts, familiar doubts, familiar excuses, they create the illusion of safety while quietly stealing your growth. That's why awareness is so powerful. When you begin to notice your thoughts, you reclaim authorship over them. You start realizing that not every idea deserves a response and not every emotion deserves control. Awareness gives you distance, and distance gives you choice. The voice that once dictated your life becomes just another sound in the background. You hear it, but it no longer commands you. This is where the transformation deepens, from reaction to intention. You start to recognize patterns, the tone of your inner critic, the way you minimize your progress, the habit of anticipating disappointment, and then something clicks. You understand that these patterns are not you. They're merely scripts written long ago by fear, comparison, and conditioning. You've been reciting someone else's dialogue in the story of your life. But now you're beginning to write your own. The human mind loves repetition because it feels safe. That's why breaking patterns feels uncomfortable. It's your brain trying to protect you from the unfamiliar. But comfort is not the same as peace. Comfort keeps you stuck. Peace comes from alignment. And alignment only happens when your inner world begins to agree with your higher purpose. You see, every great change in history began with a shift in language. Nations were built and destroyed by words. Wars were started, movements ignited, hearts awakened, all because someone spoke differently. The same is true for your personal world. The language you use defines the boundaries of your existence. If your words are small, your life becomes small. But when your words expand, your reality follows. So here's the challenge: to start speaking from the perspective of your potential, not your past. Stop narrating your life as if you're trapped in yesterday's version of yourself. You are allowed to outgrow your old story. You're allowed to speak words that your current reality doesn't yet reflect. That's not lying, that's leadership. Every visionary talks to their future before it arrives. But there's a catch. Your new language must be supported by new action. Words without alignment are noise. You can't say I'm confident and keep living in avoidance. You can't declare I'm ready for more and keep feeding fear with excuses. Real faith speaks, but it also moves. It behaves as though what it believes is already unfolding. This doesn't mean forcing positivity. It means creating integrity between your declarations and your daily behavior. You say, I am disciplined, and then you honor your commitments. You say, I am growing, and then you read, learn, stretch, fail, and rise again. You say, I am abundant, and then you start managing what you have with wisdom and gratitude. Words gain power only when they're backed by consistent practice. That's the point where self-talk becomes self-mastery. When your words stop being emotional comfort and start becoming conscious design. Every phrase you choose is a brick in the architecture of your identity. The more deliberate you are, the more stable the structure becomes. Let me tell you something. Confidence isn't built in a single victory. It's built in quiet, consistent follow-through. It's built every time you keep a promise to yourself. Every time you speak a word and then act on it, your mind begins to trust you again. And when your mind trusts you, self-doubt loses its foundation. That trust is sacred. It's what separates those who live intentionally from those who drift. Because a drifting mind will always return to what feels familiar, even if it's painful. But a focused mind moves toward what feels purposeful, even when it's uncomfortable. And this is where you must make a choice. Every day you have two voices competing for your attention. The one that describes your circumstances and the one that declares your destiny. One voice says, "This is who I've always been." The other says, "This is who I'm becoming." The voice you choose will shape the life you live. So practice choosing the second voice. Let it become your default. Let it become louder than your fear, stronger than your history, clearer than your doubt. Speak with authority. Speak with grace. Speak as though heaven itself is listening, because it is. And as you continue this journey, don't measure your growth by how fast your results appear. Measure it by how quickly you return to truth after being pulled by emotion. That's maturity, not never falling, but rising faster each time. The goal is not perfection, it's consistency. There will be days when the old voice tries to reclaim you, when exhaustion whispers, "What's the point?" But you'll know better now. You'll recognize the trick. You'll remember that your words are not just descriptions, they are declarations. And you'll respond calmly and confidently, "I am still growing, I am still guided, I am still becoming." That's the beauty of transformation. It's not about becoming someone new. It's about remembering who you already were before the world convinced you to forget. And the more you speak from that truth, the more life will begin to align with it. Your language is the bridge between your potential and your reality. Build it carefully, walk it daily, and never again let your words serve your fear. They were designed to serve your future. There's a stage in every transformation when things begin to feel strangely still. You're not where you used to be, but you're not yet where you want to go. It's an in-between season, a quiet tension that tests everything you've learned. This is the moment most people give up, not because they're weak, but because they mistake stillness for stagnation. They think silence means nothing is happening, but the truth is, Stillness is where the deepest restructuring takes place. When a seed is buried underground, no one applauds it. No one sees its progress. Yet beneath the soil, it's breaking, splitting, pushing roots into darkness. Its growth is invisible but inevitable. That's exactly what happens inside you when you begin to think differently. The mind you're rebuilding doesn't grow in public, it grows in the unseen. Every new thought, every new phrase, every small decision to speak life instead of fear is an unseen root anchoring you for what's ahead. But here's the paradox. Change brings discomfort because your old self will always fight for survival. Your patterns, your habits, even your doubts, they all have one goal: to keep you familiar, predictable, safe. Safety is their language. But safety and purpose rarely coexist. The moment you start speaking words that stretch you, your old identity begins to crumble. It whispers, "Who do you think you are? You've never done this before. You're pretending." It's not the voice of truth, it's the voice of history, and history always resists reinvention. So, what do you do in that tension? You remain. You speak the language of who you're becoming, even when it feels foreign. You remind yourself that unfamiliar doesn't mean wrong. It means new. Growth always sounds awkward at first. You're teaching your mind a new accent, one that aligns with your destiny instead of your doubt. This is where discipline becomes sacred. You don't need motivation, you need devotion. Motivation fades with emotion, but devotion stays through resistance. Devotion says, even when it feels uncomfortable, I'll keep showing up. Because your brain doesn't transform through inspiration, it transforms through consistency. The neural pathways you're building need repetition. They need to hear the same truth until it becomes their default. Let's be real. There will be days when your new words sound hollow. Days when you'll wake up and want to return to the comfort of old thinking. That's not failure. That's evidence of progress. The mind resists what it cannot yet normalize. But if you stay long enough in the discomfort, something extraordinary happens. Your new truth becomes your new normal. Think of it like walking through a dense fog. At first, every step feels uncertain. You can't see far ahead. You question whether you're even moving in the right direction. But the only way out of the fog is through it. If you keep walking, eventually the air clears. The landscape appears. The path was always there. You just had to trust it before you could see it. Trust is the engine of transformation. You don't need to have it all figured out. You just need to believe that the words you're speaking are planting something real inside you. Trust that the effort you don't yet see is still working for you. Every small act of faith compounds quietly until the breakthrough becomes visible. Let me share something I've seen in countless people. They begin strong, full of conviction, but when results don't come fast enough, they declare it isn't working. They go back to old language, old routines, old fears. But transformation doesn't work on convenience, it works on commitment. Seeds don't check for sunlight before they grow. They push through darkness until light finds them. The same principle applies to your inner life. In this season, your greatest responsibility is to protect your progress. Guard your thoughts the way a builder guards a foundation. Not every opinion deserves your attention. Not every conversation deserves your energy. You can't afford to let doubt rent space in the house you're rebuilding. When fear knocks, answer with truth. When impatience creeps in, remind yourself that time is not your enemy, it's your ally. You see, growth is not a straight line, it's a rhythm. Some days you expand, others you consolidate. Both are necessary. Expansion teaches you movement, consolidation teaches you strength. Don't despise the slower days. They're the ones that solidify what faster days created. Now let's talk about something most people overlook: emotional endurance. Transformation isn't just mental, it's emotional. It requires you to outlast the voice of discouragement. You can study, pray, affirm, and still feel resistance. That's normal. Emotional maturity isn't the absence of those feelings. It's the ability to keep going despite them. When the mind says, "I can't," the heart must whisper, "Keep walking." At this stage, the power of gratitude becomes essential. Gratitude is not a reaction to perfection, it's a recognition of progress. When you start thanking God or life or the universe for growth you can't yet see, you're training your brain to find it. Gratitude shifts your focus from what's missing to what's moving. It teaches your subconscious to see possibility instead of delay. So every night before you sleep, acknowledge even the smallest signs of change. Maybe you responded with more patience today. Maybe you caught a negative thought and replaced it. Maybe you spoke one word of courage when fear tried to silence you. That's growth, that's victory. Transformation doesn't happen in leaps, it happens in layers. And here's the final truth of this chapter. What you're building is not just a new mindset, it's a new identity. You're becoming someone who no longer depends on outside approval to feel worthy. Someone whose peace isn't borrowed from circumstances but built on inner order. Someone whose language has authority because it's born from alignment, not performance. It's not about pretending you're unshakable. It's about learning that even when you tremble, you can still stand. Even when your voice shakes, you can still speak. Even when your heart is uncertain, you can still move forward. Because power isn't the absence of fear, it's the decision to act despite it. So if you find yourself in that still uncertain space between the old and the new, don't rush it. Don't demand visible proof. Trust that beneath the surface, something holy is taking shape. The silence is not empty, it's sacred. The waiting is not wasted, it's preparation. You are not stuck, you are settling into your new strength. And when the time is right, that strength will speak for itself, quietly, confidently, unshakably. There's a point in the journey where transformation stops being a concept and starts becoming a way of life. You no longer wake up asking, will I ever change? Instead, you begin to realize you already have. Something in the way you think, the way you respond, the way you speak has shifted. It's not loud or dramatic, but it's steady. It's the quiet confidence of someone who has wrestled with their mind and finally learned how to speak peace into chaos. But make no mistake, this is where the real work begins, because transformation is not a single victory, it's maintenance. It's learning to preserve your growth when the world tries to pull you back into your old patterns. Change will always be tested, not to punish you, but to prove the strength of what's been built inside you. You'll notice it in small ways. Someone criticizes you, and instead of collapsing into self-doubt, you pause, breathe, and remember who you are. A challenge arises, and instead of saying, I can't handle this, you whisper, I was built for this. These moments may seem insignificant, but they are proof that your inner wiring has shifted. You're no longer reacting from fear, you're responding from alignment. That's the difference between living by emotion and living by intention. What most people don't understand is that transformation doesn't erase your old thoughts, it replaces their authority. The old patterns may still echo, but they no longer govern your decisions. Like a distant radio playing static, they exist in the background, but your focus has changed frequencies. You're tuned to something higher now, something clearer. There's a profound power in knowing that you can't be manipulated by your old emotions anymore. You may still feel anger, fear, or insecurity, but now you recognize them as temporary visitors, not permanent residents. You allow them to pass through without giving them your identity. That's what mastery looks like, not the absence of struggle, but the ability to stay grounded while it happens. This is why discipline becomes your new freedom. Because once your emotions stop controlling you, you begin to move with purpose. Every word, every action becomes intentional. You start choosing what enters your mind the same way you choose what enters your home. You no longer let every idea, every opinion, every fear-filled narrative take up space. You become selective, and in that selectivity you find clarity. Let me tell you a truth few people want to hear. Peace requires protection. The world will not respect your peace until you do. You have to guard it the way you would guard a treasure, because that's exactly what it is. Every time you choose not to react, not to explain, not to engage in drama, you're defending your atmosphere. You're saying, my energy is sacred and not everything deserves access to it. That's not arrogance, that's wisdom, because everything that grows needs boundaries. A garden only thrives when it's fenced from what could destroy it. Your mind is no different. Growth doesn't mean you open yourself to everything. It means you become intentional about what nourishes you. In this phase of transformation, you'll also begin to notice something powerful. Your environment will start to reflect your internal order. You'll attract conversations that inspire you, opportunities that challenge you, relationships that align with your new standards. This isn't coincidence, it's alignment. The world mirrors the energy you bring to it. When your words shift, your world shifts with them. But remember, alignment doesn't mean ease. Every new level will introduce new tension. Growth is circular. You'll revisit old lessons, but with greater awareness. You'll face similar challenges, but with different strength. What once broke, you will now build you. The pressure that once made you question yourself will now refine your focus. You begin to realize that obstacles were never the enemy. They were the gym where your inner strength was trained. That's why gratitude is still essential here, not for what you've achieved, but for what you've endured. Gratitude transforms pain into perspective. It allows you to see that nothing was wasted, that even the detours were part of the design. The things that once made you bitter now make you wiser. The wounds that once embarrassed you now carry your greatest authority. And yet the most beautiful part of this stage is how natural everything begins to feel. Speaking words of power no longer feels like an exercise. It feels like breathing. You don't have to remind yourself to think higher. Your mind naturally gravitates toward truth. You've trained it to look for possibility instead of limitation. You've taught it to see purpose in every situation. That's when the external begins to catch up with the internal. Opportunities that once intimidated you now excite you. People who once triggered your insecurities no longer have the same effect. You begin to move with quiet confidence, not because life became easier, but because your foundation became stronger. But even as you grow, humility remains the anchor, because true transformation never boasts, it glows. It doesn't need to announce itself. It simply exists, steady and unshakable. People will notice the shift in you before you do. They'll ask, what changed? And you'll smile because you know it wasn't luck or chance or circumstance. It was intentional reconstruction. It was the daily choice to build your inner world brick by brick until your outer world had no choice but to reflect it. So if you're in this season where change feels real but fragile, protect it. Water it daily with the words that brought you here. Don't rush to prove it. Don't explain it. Just live it. Transformation that's real doesn't need to be defended. It speaks through presence. And as you move forward, remember this. The goal was never to become someone else. It was to remember who you've always been beneath the noise, the doubt, and the fear. The version of you that speaks truth calmly, walks in purpose naturally, and creates without apology. That version has always been there. You just had to peel away the layers that covered it. So keep walking, keep speaking, keep choosing peace over panic, truth over fear, and alignment over approval. Because now you understand your words don't just describe your world, they define its direction. And the direction you're moving in is unmistakable, forward, higher, freer. There comes a time when you stop searching for transformation and start living it. It's no longer about chasing motivation or waiting for a sign. It becomes something quieter, deeper, more grounded. You start realizing that true change isn't a burst of inspiration. It's a steady state of awareness. It's when the way you think, speak, and move begins to align naturally with who you were always meant to be. This stage of the journey feels different. You don't wake up desperate for breakthrough. You wake up curious. You start asking better questions. How can I grow today? What can I learn from this moment? What is this challenge trying to teach me? Those questions carry a different kind of power. They turn struggle into strategy, because once you stop seeing obstacles as punishment and start seeing them as preparation, life begins to feel less like a battlefield and more like a classroom. You notice your energy shifting. Things that once drained you no longer have the same pull. Arguments that used to trap you lose their flavor. You no longer feel the need to defend your peace. You simply embody it. That's when you realize growth is not about becoming louder. It's about becoming clearer. When you know who you are, silence becomes your statement. At this point, your words have weight. You've learned that not every truth needs to be spoken and not every battle needs to be fought. Wisdom has replaced impulse. You start to value pauses more than reactions. You listen not to respond, but to understand. You begin to sense what's worth your voice and what's better left to time. This maturity is not passive, it's power under control. There's a beauty in restraint that few people ever discover. The world celebrates noise, the bold, the urgent, the loud, but true mastery whispers. It doesn't need attention to be effective. It knows that influence doesn't come from volume, but from depth. Every calm word, every grounded decision becomes an anchor for others still caught in the storm. That's the quiet authority of someone who has learned to rule their inner world. But here's the paradox. The more peaceful you become, the more life will test that peace. The world doesn't always respond kindly to people who are no longer reactive. When you stop feeding chaos, chaos feels threatened. Old environments may try to pull you back. People accustomed to your old patterns may resist your calm. Don't be surprised when peace feels lonely at first. It's the loneliness of elevation, the kind that happens when you rise above what once defined you. You'll start to recognize that not everyone can go where you're going, and that's okay. Growth requires separation, not in distance, but in vibration. You can love people without joining them in their confusion. You can offer compassion without sacrificing clarity. Protecting your peace isn't selfish, it's stewardship. You can't pour light into the world if your own flame keeps being smothered by noise. And yet, as you walk through this season of refinement, something extraordinary happens. Your perspective expands. You begin to understand that everything that once hurt you was part of your construction. Every disappointment was discipline in disguise. Every delay was divine timing at work. You see patterns now, connections between your pain and your progress. You realize nothing was random. Every thread had purpose. This is the wisdom phase of transformation, the point where your mind and spirit start working together instead of competing. The heart no longer rushes ahead and the mind no longer holds back. They move in sync. Faith and logic, vision and patience, word and action. You begin to live in alignment with your own rhythm, and that rhythm feels like peace. The beautiful thing about this stage is how effortless creation becomes. You're no longer forcing results, you're attracting them. You speak with intention, move with clarity, and things begin to unfold naturally. People call it luck, but you know better. You've simply learned to flow with the principles of order instead of fighting against them. There's a quiet miracle that happens when your mind and your words are aligned. You stop manifesting chaos. You stop running in circles. Your energy becomes precise and life responds with the same precision. Opportunities arrive not because you chased them, but because you became the kind of person who could sustain them. But here's where many fall back. They mistake this peace for completion. They think the journey is over, that they've arrived. But transformation isn't a destination, it's a discipline. The moment you stop nurturing it, old patterns begin to whisper again. Pride can be as dangerous as fear if it makes you think you no longer need growth. Humility is what keeps the soil fertile. So even in mastery, remain a student. Keep learning, keep refining, keep returning to the basics. Your words, your thoughts, your focus, these are the tools that built your foundation, and they'll be the same ones that expand it. Every day, you're either reinforcing your peace or eroding it. There is no neutral ground. In this season, your consistency matters more than your intensity. You don't need to prove your growth through grand gestures or dramatic changes. You prove it by remaining steady, by staying kind when it's easier to be cold, by staying patient when results take time, by staying grounded when everything around you is chaotic. That's what makes transformation permanent, quiet consistency. And when doubt occasionally returns, as it will, don't panic. Just remember how far you've come. Look back at the version of yourself who once thought peace was impossible, who once thought confidence was a fantasy, who once begged for clarity and now lives in it. That reflection is proof of divine progress. So breathe. Keep walking. Keep speaking the language of alignment, even on days it feels small. Because every time you choose awareness over anxiety, purpose over pressure, you reinforce the truth the transformation was never about becoming someone else. It was about coming home to yourself. And maybe that's the real miracle. Not that you've changed, but that you've returned to a sound mind, a clear spirit, a peaceful strength. The kind of strength that doesn't shout, doesn't rush, doesn't need validation. It simply is. And from that stillness, everything else flows.